The political climate in America seems to be heating up around the issue of global warming, as the newly elected president seems to be making strides to reverse the policies put in place by the last administration. On November 6, 2012, the president tweeted that the concept of global warming was created by and for the Chinese government as a means to control U.S. manufacturing, thus making it less competitive. He holds a belief that climate change is a hoax.
Setting aside the sick sort of amusement I found in reading that, I started to wonder what exactly convinced him that climate change is a form of Chinese sabotage, when most scientific evidence supports the threat of global warming to our way of life. In TOK world, evidence in the area of science holds a certain amount of authority because experts in the field test their hypotheses through experiments, and the results of their experiments are extensively reviewed before it becomes part of the shared knowledge. However, in this case, the president disregarded the shared knowledge in favor of his own personal knowledge. Within science, there are things put in place in order to rely solely on reason and sensory perception, because these ways of knowing produce justifiable, observable results independent of human agency. The methods that are used to produce knowledge in this area make knowledge generally more reliable than in other fields because there is a systematic way to test hypotheses, and these tests are analyzed by using reason. While reason would dictate that the many studies that show evidence supporting that climate change is a threat should hold some weight, there are other ways of knowing that can cause an individual to doubt the shared knowledge. Most of all, this is emotion, because emotion can lead an individual to feel as if they know better than the experts in the field or cause them to mistrust an expert. This led us to consider the question, can emotion be used when interpreting shared knowledge to produce valuable personal knowledge within the sciences? But in order to fully answer this question, we must define value. Value will be used here to refer to something that allows for a beneficial outcome despite the intentions or knowledge that is correct.
We will first make the claim that emotion cannot be used to interpret shared knowledge to make it personal because emotions get in the way of correctly interpreting facts and theories, preventing people from understanding them fully. This can be seen when people, such as my own mother, began believing that autism is linked to vaccines. Although there were many other studies that disproved the theory, the public was afraid that autism was linked to vaccines. Even after the scientists in charge of the study that produced the theory renounced it, it was a fear in the eyes of the public for a long time after. This is because the fear that vaccines cause autism is stronger than reason, leading people to believe that autism is linked to vaccines. My mother has always staunchly believed in not taking risks even if one article said that something could cause a health risk, and refused to listen to the science of it, no matter how large the majority was. This fear could be beneficial to us when we need to survive. To have a strong fear of something and therefore avoid it would allow us to avoid things that are potentially harmful and survive longer. However, within the area of science, this fear causes people to think irrationally. The shared knowledge of the scientific community, which is made of experts and academics who research and study the different branches of science, is that vaccines do not cause autism. However, when an individual reads about studies that say it does cause autism, the only knowledge that becomes personal is the belief that the two are linked. As shared knowledge becomes personal, the knowledge that they learn is influenced by their personal perspectives and subject to their own emotions. This is because the things that we remember and learn are the things that make us feel the most emotions, while the mundane things that elicit no emotion are hardly ever remembered. This means that when people are interpreting shared knowledge in order to make it personal, the things that they will remember are things that cause them to feel strong emotions. In this example, the people remembered the one study over the others because it caused them to feel fear. Because of this, their emotions clouded their judgment and caused people to behave irrationally. People's emotions can cloud their reasoning, which is necessary for knowledge production in the natural sciences. This leads us to conclude that emotion is not valuable in the sciences because it leads people into believing the thing that they want to believe, instead of the facts. Because emotion can lead people to misunderstand the shared knowledge when they make it personal, emotion cannot be used to create personal knowledge from shared knowledge. Relating this back to the original example about the president's tweet, it may become obvious that the emotion that fueled him to communicate his hypothesis for that global warming is a Chinese trap makes the information that he produced not valuable in the natural sciences. This is because he made this assumption without scientific evidence supporting him, relying on emotion as a way of knowing that the Chinese are attempting to sabotage the U.S. Emotions like pride could have caused him to believe that he knew better than the experts in the field. Or fear and paranoia may have caused him to conclude that the Chinese are sabotaging American manufacturing by manipulating climate change, causing him to misinterpret the shared knowledge when creating personal knowledge. While there may be grounds for the United States to be cautious of China's growth, there is no scientific evidence that supports that global warming is a hoax. Emotions such as pride or arrogance caused the president to misinterpret the shared knowledge among scientists and come to a conclusion that is not relevant.
Looking at this question from a different angle shows that the role of emotion is intentionally reduced when knowledge in the natural sciences is produced. This is because experts try to come to conclusions that are based in reason and can be reproduced. As the natural sciences seek to understand the world around us, experts try to explain phenomena that go on in our world in generalities that can be applied to every situation. Therefore, reason is used because there is a clear logical sequence of steps through which every person may arrive at the same conclusion. Because emotions are specific to every individual, it seems safe to assume that emotion is not a valuable way of knowing for knowledge within the natural sciences. The scientific method, for example, uses a step-by-step process to ensure that conclusions are made based on observations and that all procedures are recorded so that the conclusions drawn from the experiment may be reviewed. By going through this process, scientists minimize the role of their own emotions and motivations to conduct investigations that are independent of human agency. When scientists take the shared knowledge and make it personal, they do so by applying the scientific knowledge they learned in order to carry out their own experiments. There is often a bias in these experiments for the results of their study to agree with their hypotheses, which is their personal knowledge. This bias can be traced back to emotion, as scientists may feel pressure to prove their hypotheses are correct, or because it provides them a sense of gratification for producing a theory that is accurate. These emotions often stem from an emotional attachment to their theories, and that they often formulate after large amounts of research and preparation, learning and interpreting the shared knowledge. These emotions express themselves in experiments in the form of bias, as researchers attempt to make their experiment come out one way after they formed an emotional attachment to the theory they produce and want to show that they are correct. In other words, they have a bias because they want their theory or personal knowledge to become part of the shared knowledge and be accepted, to the point where it is possible for experimenters to accidentally or intentionally tamper with their own experiments. Because of this, there are specific methods that are used to minimize the role of emotion, such as the double-blind experiment. In this specific type of experiment, researchers minimize bias by making it so that both the person implementing the experiment and the participant are unaware of the identity of the person who is receiving the emotional treatment, or who is receiving the experimental treatment. For example, in taste testing experiments, a researcher might arrange the beverages to favor one they want to pass more than the others. By randomly rearranging the opaque cups, this eliminates any potential bias. Similarly, computer-generated surveys are another example. The researcher and participant never have any contact with each other, and therefore there is no influence on the other whatsoever. Furthermore, the participant does not know what the research question is, so that knowledge cannot influence their answers, resulting in unskewed data. Double blinds ensure that the experimenter doesn't influence the participant, and that the participant's reactions to the treatment truly show whether or not there is a difference between the control and experimental groups. This increases the reliability and validity of the test by preventing the experimenter from influencing the experiment. In this way, the scientists that set up the experiment are minimizing or eliminating bias as much as possible. To expand on what we mentioned earlier, this bias can be traced back to emotion because the bias stems from scientists wanting to prove that his or her view of the world is correct. In turn, this stems from emotion because this bias is often intentionally eliminated in studies. It can be assumed that the bias of the experimenter to have their experiment turn out one way makes emotion not valuable in the natural sciences.
But in order to fully understand the knowledge question, it may be useful to explore the things that help create bias in the natural science. As we mentioned earlier, emotion is the root of bias. However, there are certain circumstances that shape a researcher's bias a certain way. Because the natural sciences seek to explain the world in universal rules and terms, research done will stem from the scientist's understanding of their world. in an attempt to prove that their belief or hypothesis is correct. This in itself is done systematically, but the biases that are created have many sources. These sources may have come from their parents' values, the culture they grew up in, or previous research, but all of it culminates in the researcher's worldview. In this way, the biases stem from researchers' previous personal knowledge about the world. Emotion plays a role in creating bias because they want to believe that their view of the world is correct, and it is possible that they might intentionally or subconsciously alter their experiments, unless they follow standardized procedures. Similarly, the biases present in people's minds will cause them to interpret shared knowledge in a way that agrees with their worldview, meaning that their emotions will ultimately dictate the way that they understand new information. Biases are often self-affirming in that they pick up on information that agree with them and disregard information that doesn't. This makes it all the more necessary to eliminate biases in the natural sciences by performing tests. By relating this back to the original example of the tweet, it may again be deduced that emotion is not valuable in the natural sciences. This is because the president's tweet was not supported by solid evidence, and instead stemmed from emotions and biases, which should have been reduced or eliminated when formulating his theory. However, the heavily biased tweet serves an example of knowledge that is produced through emotion only. Without being tempered by other ways of knowing or following their procedures, this knowledge is not valuable because it allowed for biases to influence the processing of the shared knowledge, which is that climate change is a threat, and allow for the personal knowledge that climate change is a hoax to be incorrect.
However, we will also examine the counterclaim that emotion is sometimes a valuable way of knowing in the sciences. People are extremely suggestible, to the point where simply believing something is enough to make us feel as if there were a physical change. Because of this, our emotions may be valuable in some cases because they lead to results that are beneficial. There is a phenomenon known as the placebo effect, which refers to when a patient believes that they are being treated and therefore feels better. For example, we have a teacher who feeds her kids spoonfuls of honey, which she dubbed magic medicine. Whenever they complain about not feeling well, she gives them a spoonful and it cures the majority of their ailments. The treatment makes the patient feel as if they should feel better by triggering the same emotions of relief that they would feel if they went to a doctor and received a solution for their ailment. Because of this triggering of emotions, the patient physically feels better than when they arrived. A similar example of this is in the field of homeopathy, which is a pseudoscience that uses unconventional cures to make people feel better. It is based on the work of Samuel Hahnemann, who came up with the theories that like cures like, and that treating symptoms is the same as curing the disease. One specific example of this is the use of water in order to cure diseases because water has microparticles in it. While there is no scientific evidence that shows that water could cure diseases, people report to feel better. On one hand, there is a shared knowledge of the scientists whose evidence show that homeopathy doesn't actually work, and on the other, there is a personal knowledge of the individuals who believe that homeopathy will work and therefore feel better. It is obvious that the people who believe in homeopathic treatments believe in them because they feel better, which means that these emotions mimic the relief of real treatment, and that these emotions overcome the reason and knowledge of scientists. In this case, emotion overcomes shared knowledge and reason again, but it is clear that the person's emotions caused a positive outcome. In this, we can conclude that emotion does tend to cloud reason, but this isn't always a bad thing.
Though it is typically regarded as such, emotion clouding our reason can sometimes lead to positive effects, meaning that emotion is sometimes valuable in the natural sciences. This may be because personal knowledge, which is influenced by the individual's biases, emotions, and worldview, forms the basis of all scientific knowledge. What starts out as one's theory may come to change the whole perception of science in our reality. In this, the same emotions that override reason, which is the foundation of the natural sciences, can work to revise old theories. Because emotion, such as pride or fear, push people to formulate new theories and answers, and because their biases cause them to offer up different hypotheses, emotions can provide the necessary motivation for people to challenge pre-existing ideas to revise them. When used in conjunction with reason, emotion can lead to new explorations. This is because personal knowledge of how something may work lays the foundation for all shared knowledge. Experiments designed based solely on personal knowledge may be applied to a larger scope in order to allow for the results of that one experiment to be applied universally, making it shared knowledge. This shows that emotion is sometimes valuable in the natural sciences.
That being said, emotion must be tempered by reason and must not interfere with the scientific process to verify the hypothesis it creates when interpreting the shared knowledge to make it personal. This is because of the basic nature of personal knowledge in the natural sciences. When shared knowledge becomes personal, it often leads to the individual trying to contribute back to the shared knowledge. In other words, it is important for personal knowledge to also be based in reason because personal knowledge is often acquired for the intention of becoming shared again. An individual will learn from the shared knowledge and make it personal. Then they will conduct an experiment in order to verify their hypothesis formed based on the way that they interpreted the knowledge. When this information is contributed back to the shared knowledge, it is only accepted after it has undergone the standardized methods in science and after it has been reviewed by other individuals who apply their personal and shared knowledge to understand its reasoning. This means that while emotion may be useful in forming a hypothesis, these emotions must be checked before knowledge that is produced is again accepted by the community.
Relating this perspective to the original example, it becomes obvious that there is a possibility that being based in emotion does not necessarily mean that the knowledge is not valuable, because emotion as a way of knowing may sometimes be valuable within the natural sciences. This is because the same emotions that cause the president to misinterpret shared knowledge could also spur someone else to find more about global warming and the causes. However, the issue with the tweet is that he did not conduct an experiment, or base his knowledge off of an experiment that was conducted by someone else. Instead, these emotions led him to a conclusion that was wrong. While emotion may be somewhat useful, reason must also be employed and the hypothesis must be tested. In this specific example, emotion caused the president to believe that global warming is a hoax, but it was not checked by reason. Reason and emotion should be used together when forming a hypothesis, and there should not be an abundance of either of the two. While emotion allows motivation for someone to formulate a hypothesis, reason makes sure that the hypothesis is something that is based in scientific evidence, so that the information presented is valuable.
In conclusion, the natural sciences rely on methods such as the scientific method that dictate that hypotheses must be tested in a way that is reproducible. Because emotions are suggestible by nature, they are usually not a valuable way of knowing when interpreting the shared knowledge to create personal knowledge when used by themselves. This is because of the nature of personal knowledge and because in natural science it often becomes shared again as individuals come to conclusions and share their conclusions with the scientific community. This makes it important that the personal knowledge is correct or that the conclusion is relevant. While emotion may be helpful in forming a hypothesis or produce the necessary motivation for people to challenge previously accepted theories, it is necessary that these emotions are checked by reasoning in order for the information produced to be valuable.